In this series, I'm uncovering the history of the ordinary British home. I want to explore the homes that most of us live in and that most of us take for granted. From Tudor cottages and Victorian terraces to post-war high-rise flats, I want to reveal how these often ordinary-looking homes are in fact extraordinary.
Full!
In each episode, I'll search out the stories of how and why our homes were built, and I'll explore the evidence of centuries of design and redesign.
Since I've got you here and I can explore your plumbing in detail. Our homes offer an intimate portrait of our public and our private selves. From the glass in our windows to the gadgets in our kitchens, they lay bare how healthy, how wealthy, even how happy we are.
Cheeks, the balls.
We have nothing in common. I'm always kissing architecture too. She loves a terraced house.
I'll uncover the architectural details which have shaped our social history and transformed our daily lives.
I want to go beyond masonry and mortar and come face to face with residents, past and present. I want to understand how they lived and how they transformed buildings into homes.
This is the Lincoln Estate, Bromley by Bow, East London, a landmark council housing scheme. It was designed in the late 1950s, opened in the early 1960s, and at its heart are two 19-storey blocks of flats. The construction of these twin towers was part of a nationwide explosion in high-rise living. Over 6,000 skyscrapers sprung up in the post-war era, forever changing the architecture of Britain's towns and cities.
The very term flat evokes an aura of modernism, of futuristic living high in the sky.
And these towers were indeed a very modern solution to an ever-present national problem. In the wake of the Second World War, Britain was in the grip of a housing crisis. 2 million British homes had been destroyed or damaged by the Luftwaffe's bombing campaign. But the impact of the war was just one part of a wider malaise. The terrace, the solution to a Victorian housing crisis, had itself become a problem. Dilapidated, overcrowded, and often squalid. By the 1950s, 5 million working-class Britons were living in terraced slums. Politicians demanded a solution, and it fell to a group of idealistic post-war architects to eradicate the problem. They would shun the traditional house and garden and embrace continental ideas of high-rise living.
I want to discover how the high-rise flat became the answer to Britain's post-war housing crisis and why this modern way of living became loathed and loved in almost equal measure.
There's one estate in East London chart in microcosm, the story of a bold architectural experiment to rehouse an entire class. The idea of multi-storey living had been around for centuries. The Scottish tenement was essentially a 3 or 4-storey block of flats. In Victorian London, mansion blocks were built for rich and poor alike. Philanthropic trusts like Peabody and Guinness put up subsidised homes for workers. In smart St James's, the 12-storey Queen Anne mansions so upset Queen Victoria in 1874, spoiling her view of Parliament, that new buildings over 80 feet high were banned in the centre of London for decades. 100 years later, British architects took the traditional flat and transformed it to provide mass housing for working people. They drew their inspiration from a radical new architectural movement that was sweeping across Europe: modernism. It turned its back on history and ornament to embrace the new, and had its roots in the intellectual ferment of the interwar years. Then Bauhaus pioneers Walter Gropius and Mies van der Rohe argued that emerging technologies permitted a wholly modern, clean, minimal design. At the same time, the man who came to epitomise the movement, French architect Le Corbusier, was formulating a radical agenda. He believed that the new architecture had the power to transform the way people lived, and with it, society. His theory is exemplified by the Unité de Habitation, a massive apartment block in Marseille that he designed in 1947. Inside, each flat is laid out to reflect the utilitarian credo that form should follow function. But the Unité also embraced street-like corridors with shops and cafes. His roof had a running track and a children's play area, all inspired by Le Corbusier's belief in communal, collective living. To some, he was a false prophet, his ideal fatally flawed. To others, a utopian visionary. And amongst his devotees, a generation of British politicians and architects.
These buildings, when designed, were very much part of the modernist vision. Now, they've been much altered since completion in 1962, but the vision is still apparent. They're still very abstract, very functional in appearance, and the great thing is they stand as great sculptural objects in open space, so the residents have a mini park to enjoy, and light would flood inside. In the 1960s, such towers were sprouting up all over Britain.
The Lincoln estate was designed by the London County Council, or LCC Architects Department. One of their number was a young idealist, David Gregory Jones. He dreamt up the inner-city 19-storey reinforced concrete Lincoln whilst living in leafy suburban Bexley Heath. In the late 1950s, when David Gregory Jones was developing his design, he lived here as a lodger in the Red House, this wonderful arts and crafts masterpiece designed for and partly by William Morris. At the time, the Red House was owned by Ted Hollenby, a leading London County Council architect. Now, Hollenby and Gregory Jones had a shared vision. They believed that architecture had a social purpose. Its role was to improve the homes, the lives, the environment of ordinary working people. At first glance, modernism, with its emphasis on industrialised mass production and clean lines, was very different from the arts and crafts movement, celebrated here, which took curvy Gothic and handcrafted construction as its inspiration. But in fact, the tension and links between the two made the Red House a ferment of debate. There was a row brewing about whether hardline modernism was applicable to soft old Britain.
In 1950s Britain, there were, I suppose, two strands of modernism. One could call, I guess, hard, inspired by the machine age, mass production, industrialisation, and so on, the machine aesthetic. And the other, perhaps called soft. Which did David Gregory Jones pursue?
Oh, it's very clear, especially actually when you're standing here inside the Red House, that Hollenby and Gregory Jones followed the softer, if you like, model, really based on the Swedish progressive housing programme of the 1930s, where you used vernacular materials, using colour in brick, incorporating details like planters and timber cladding to kind of give a domestic feel to this type of modernism.
Tell me about the influence that William Morris, the arts and crafts movement, and of course the glorious Red House, where we're standing. Tell me about the influence they had on British modernism in the 50s and 60s.
From a very early age, Gregory Jones really believed in the social power that architecture could provide to people. And he was a committed socialist. In fact, he was actually a fully paid up member of the Communist Party. So he certainly shared the socialist values of Morris. And in fact, by living here with Hollenby and living in this communal lifestyle, sharing activities and communal spaces and the restoration of this house, he was really able to kind of play out those socialist ideals
So they lived here in a Morris-like way.
Exactly. And imagine how exciting that must have been to not only be in the house that you've read about and heard about and was integral to this whole arts and craft movement, but to actually live it yourself.
Whether working-class East Enders actually wanted to live in a utopian paradise, dreamt up by distant architects, was another matter altogether. Many cherished their slum homes. The terrace had given birth to a close-knit community where life revolved around the tightly packed streets. Working-class Londoners weren't ready for the radical change of lifestyle offered by high-rise flats. I've come to Tower Hamlets archives to gauge the depth of opposition to the LCC's plans for the Lincoln. The planning of the Lincoln estate in the late 1950s was a highly controversial affair, as is made clear from these files of memos and letters between the London County Council, Poplar Borough Council, and the government, the Ministry of Housing and Local Government. For example, this memo here from the town clerk of Poplar Borough Council: much of the proposed development arises from planning ideas which are not very closely related to practical living conditions in a borough such as Poplar. Absolutely right, the ideas were continental. Le Corbusier, the great visionary schemes of continental Europe for streets in the sky. The LCC sustained its position in the face of opposition from Poplar, and this is a memo within the LCC reiterating the benefits of the scheme. All the living rooms would face south and would enjoy magnificent views across the river to the hills in Surrey and Kent. Poplar point out that, on the other hand, the Borough Council contend that the main outlook will be on power stations, gasworks, and smoke and grime. So, basically you have here the vision of modern living, the ideal state of modern living, in contrast, in conflict with the reality, as pointed out by the people actually living in Poplar. Incredibly fascinating. Now, here we have a response from the Ministry of Housing and Local Government addressed to the LCC. So this is essentially the planning consent. The government has supported the LCC against the reservations of the local politicians to build in Poplar, at this stage, one 19-storey block of housing for local people. The fierce local resistance to the estate was no anomaly. The modern flat polarised opinion across the country as community after community was changed out of all recognition. In London alone, 100,000 terraced houses were bulldozed as hundreds of tower blocks rose up from the ashes of the slums. Planning permission in hand, it took the LCC just 2 years to knock this area flat and to start building the Lincoln.
In the summer of 1962, the first residents arrived, standing in the shadow of the tower. All of them council tenants lucky enough to be given a flat in this futuristic skyscraper.
There was like about 6 people there, and there was 6 masonettes available. And we had a choice as to what floor we wanted to live on. And I wanted to live on the first floor, I didn't want to go up the top. So I just took the keys that was for the first floor and I just let everybody else go and find theirs.
When I first moved in, I was amazed to think there was so much room. Because I thought, oh, I've got another tiny little flat, you know, that's what I expected. And when first day I went in, I thought, wow.
Really lovely. I was so chuffed. Happy bunny I was.
Sleaford and Gayton House were the tallest skyscrapers in London, soaring nearly 200 feet in the air.
Entrance vestibule, rather arid, empty, I suppose, to discourage loitering. Originally, of course, there wasn't an entrance vestibule. the ground floor was open, and the ground floor would remain available for public use and enjoyment. And I suppose one can see here concrete piers, very much in the kind of modernist idea. Here they are, concrete here. And then I say open from back to front, a vista through the building.
The piers or pilotti on which the towers rested were the most visible sign of the Lincoln's debt to Le Corbusier. To him, pilotti were the expression of a structural frame, allowing adaptable interiors and ensuring the land on which the building stood could remain in public use. The pilotti left the towers seemingly floating in space. The towers were largely made of reinforced concrete, and it was this material that allowed the LCC's architects to realise its space-age vision. Concrete is cheap, versatile, and incredibly strong once reinforced with steel, and it was used to create pretty much every part of the Lincoln's towers. Their internal walls, floors, and abstract patterned facades. I'm at Cemex, one of the world's largest concrete companies, to find out how the Lincoln was built.
Concrete used in the 1960s, is it significantly different to concrete used today?
It's similar in terms of its raw materials. Specifications have changed massively, but still made with similar raw materials to this. A coarse aggregate.
Those are basically pebbles.
You may call them pebbles, we would call them
Just
aggregate.
for our viewer. And then this, I would call that sand.
That is sand, so that's
water.
Water, yeah.
And this is Portland.
That's Portland cement.
Portland cement. This
Yes.
is basically
Clay, chalk,
yes,
which is heated up and then grained.
right.
So the coarse aggregate gives you the stability and the volume
Yes,
in your coarse
yes,
aggregate.
yes.
Your fine aggregate, the sand, is giving you your cohesion.
Yes, yes.
And then the cement there is your binder, your glue,
Right.
to ultimately give you your compressive strength.
Okay, so now presumably one puts them in the mixer.
Indeed, yep.
Oh goodness. I've got a whole beach here.
One last coarse aggregate.
The sand.
And now we can add our sand one after.
Okay. Yeah. It's looking good already, eh?
Then we'll add our water, yeah?
Well, I can see why you got into concrete. It's wonderful. Well, it's wonderful, isn't it?
But liquid concrete doth not a 19-storey tower make. What happens next hasn't changed much in 60 years. This is Great Eastern Quay, one of the biggest new developments in East London, just a few miles from the Lincoln. Project director Brad Coker is going to give me a crash course in how to build a 200-foot-high skyscraper. Steel reinforcement is added to the raw concrete to give increased load-bearing strength. This is crucial in tall buildings, where the weight bearing down on lower stories is immense. Bars of steel are joined into cages, ready to be used on site.
Well, can you show me what it would have been like to build the towers on the Lincoln estate 6 or so years ago?
Yeah, we've got the starter steels coming out, so they come out of the ground to up to there. Then we've got the steel cage that we saw them making up
So
downstairs.
this is a steel reinforcing for the concrete.
This is it. This
Right.
is the strength within the concrete.
Yeah. And what are these?
These little wheels is what we've got here, little spacers. So when the shutter goes on, they clamp onto there. The shutter pushes up against that.
Oh, I get it. Okay, so the shutter, the timber mould. This in fact gives us spacing between the steel reinforcing and the concrete.
What you can't have is the elements getting through to the
Yes.
steel and that rusting.
This one's about to go. We should get this one,
Yeah.
shouldn't we? This is a good one.
Once the wooden moulds or shutters are ready, the liquid concrete is pumped inside via this huge hose. When the shutter is full, a machine vibrates the concrete to remove any trapped air bubbles.
It's the vibration now, the vibration's going on.
That's it, they're doing that now as we're standing
Stop.
here. So very quick, they'll vibrate that from the bottom up, they'll check the depth, and then that's left overnight.
So we have seen that pier being formed as we've chatted, that's it?
That's it, done.
Oh, here we are, the shuttering or mould has been removed, and here's the finished product.
So we've got the hard, solid concrete.
Concrete, yeah.
This was poured yesterday, shutter was removed this morning, and that's here now, and will be for the next several years.
Several years, eternity. It's impossible to overestimate the importance of steel-reinforced concrete. Durable, structurally strong, cheap, and indeed rather beautiful. It offered thousands of people the chance to have a home of their own. And also, when concrete was exposed visually, as on the elevation of a building, its rather tough and rough and brutal character helped to define the architecture of the 1960s and 1970s.
That look gave its name to a type of modernism, brutalist, which comes from the French béton brut, meaning raw concrete, exemplified by Balfron Tower, another extraordinary 60s building just a mile from the Lincoln.
Go up.
But the Lincoln Towers were more about rational and minimal design. You might expect residents to be living in monkish cells.
It works.
But not so. Lincoln resident June Needham has lived on the 17th floor for over 40 years.
Hello.
Hello, I'm June.
I'm Dan.
Welcome to my home.
Thank you very much. Can I...
Come in.
Thank you. Have a look round. So very nice, the entrance lobby. And here, presumably, is a bathroom.
And
Yes.
toilet.
Yes, yes. Originally would have been 2 rooms, 2 separate rooms, presumably.
Yeah.
Yes.
There was a wall down in the middle.
Yes.
And then they said it'd be nice if we had it in one more room,
Yes.
bigger.
Bit more space.
Bit more space, yeah.
And in your flat, the entrance is at bedroom level, so here are the bedrooms.
My bedroom and the spare room.
Yes, they're big rooms, aren't they?
Yeah, they are big.
Generous.
The
Generous
other
space.
side is different.
Yes, you enter the other side, presumably.
Yeah,
living
they
room
go
level.
into their kitchen and living room and they
right.
go up to bed, whereas we go down to bed. Would you like to go upstairs next door?
I'd love to, thank you
I'll
very
leave
much.
you to it.
OK, I'll see you in a minute, maybe. Oh, thank you.
Gregory Jones's flats are rather unusual. They're on 2 floors, a design known as a scissor section.
Oh, now, the bedrooms are below and up here, the kitchen and the sitting room, the living area, split-level living, very modern. You maximise the space in every way possible, so lots of cupboards. I suppose the original little handle here is a latch, isn't it? Oh, yes, you press that and you release the button. Ah, OK. Oh, an airing cupboard, I guess. There's a boiler in here, immersion heater now, and a lovely detail. Again, I say, to be efficient with storage space, the architects designed these rather charming little sliding holders for your clothes. Oh, the kitchen. Now, the kitchen is pretty compact, pretty small, just a galley kitchen, really. Very much a machine for food preparation. The largest room in the flat, the sitting room, and I suppose also would have been the dining room, being next door to the kitchen, dining room table here. And of course, the whole wall here is made of glass, allowing light to flood inside, of course, but also offering sensational vistas, prospects over London, looking south over the docks. And another favoured modernist detail is a very generous balcony, allowing one to stand outside and get the air, take the view, but also one can get some exercise. It's big enough. It's like certainly is, like a street in the sky.
I couldn't go onto the balcony. I couldn't. My husband, I used to stand right near it, and he'd say, "Come on, come out here. I'll hold on to you. Come out." He said, "No, you're not going to fall or anything." I said, "No, it's too high." I said, "I can't go out there." But once I started going out there, you can't stop me going out there now. It's lovely, really lovely.
I didn't realise they were masonettes. And then when you walk through the front door and to the right of you, there's stairs. And I thought, where the hell do the stairs go?
Although lacking the ornament you might find in earlier homes, these flats are extraordinary. They're supremely functional, very generous in space, and the main rooms are flooded with light. They offered decent housing for ordinary working people, housing provided by the state. They were part of a social and political revolution. When the Lincoln estate was designed, the London County Council had the largest and in many ways the finest architectural practice in the world. Indeed, it was responsible for the creation of some of the most iconic modernist housing schemes in Europe. I'm now on my way to see original drawings of the Lincoln estate, to see how it was initially envisaged and how it and individual flats were laid out.
Elaine Harwood of Historic England is an expert on the work of the London County Council's Architects Department.
How important is the Lincoln estate? How typical is it of LCC developments of this period?
It's very typical indeed. It's the real ideal plan of taking an old area, retaining a few of the public buildings, like Francis Mary Bus Settlement, the church, those sort of institutional buildings survive. The roads get truncated. I think tidy streets been chopped to give you more space for grassland and play area for leapfrog, marbles, hopscotch. And so into that net comes a mix of low-rise houses for families made possible by having your one or later two tall blocks. So number 10 is your block. So the whole thing gives you 140 people per acre as your density.
A comprehensive development created to make life better.
Here's the ground plan. What you do have that's a big advance is a boiler room and tank for central heating to the whole block.
Right.
This is one of the very first to have central heating.
And it's communal central heating.
That's right, yes.
All the flats benefit, hot water.
Everybody gets everything at presumably all much the same temperature.
Maybe in more detail. Now, this is where we can talk about this amazing innovation here, that this is a section I need.
Helpful at the top. We've got the main corridor connecting all the flats to the lift. So you're coming in one side onto bedroom level and going up those stairs across the landing to your kitchen and living room. And there's your little outside balcony. On the other side of the corridor, you come into a little lobby into your kitchen with your living room beyond, and going upstairs to a landing and your bedroom, and that's the crossover. So one lot of stairs do that, one lot of stairs do that, giving you your scissor section.
In David Gregory Jones's design, pairs of flats are stacked one on top of each other in an elegant crossover layout, minimising wasted space, maximising the number of people each block can hold. It also means that all the bedrooms and living rooms are kept separate on opposite sides of the building, and that each flat has a dual aspect, with living rooms facing south and bedrooms north. This was the first time the scissor section, inspired by Le Corbusier, had been used in the UK.
Oh, it felt so big. You know, having the 2 floors, I thought, oh, this is brilliant, this is, having 2 floors.
It's just like a house, really, because you know your bedrooms are upstairs and the bathroom's upstairs. But opposite when they have to come downstairs to bed and in the bathroom. Yeah, I think that's really weird.
The original plans of the Lincoln envisioned paved children's play areas and open grassland. People would flow from them into the ground floor and the long internal corridors, all of them completely open to the public. A reimagining of Le Corbusier's internal streets of shops and cafes. But here in London, there wasn't the money or political will to replicate Le Corbusier's model. No shops, no cafes. It turned out to be a fatal mistake, but one overlooked in the excitement aroused by the Lincoln's embrace of technology. First and foremost, a lift. Without which the whole project would have been impossible, as people laboured up 19 flights of stairs.
Lifts made high-rise living possible, but they were expensive. Lifts could add up to 20% to the construction cost of each flat. Seems amazing. Also, lifts produced amongst some housing authorities in the 1950s a sense of almost moral panic. They feared lifts would be abused by joyriders, or by courting couples, or abused by tradesmen who'd use them as public conveniences and urinate in them. Now, let's go and put it up. Afternoon.
Today, the world's fastest lifts travel at an eye-popping 50 feet a second.
Doors closing.
In 1962, the Lincolns managed a mere 5 feet. But it was enough to usher in the high-rise revolution. Gregory Jones's transformation didn't stop at the lift door.
Now, a bathroom with constant running water would have been a sensational innovation for most families moving into this block in the early 1960s. Families that had come from terraced houses, with often there'd be a bath in the kitchen. To have a discreet bathroom with constant hot water literally on tap would have been amazing. And here it is. But I suppose more amazing still would have been a private internal lavatory. Lavatories often then were in the yard, outside, and in many cases shared with other families. So an amazing sort of innovation, a transformer of the quality of their life.
In the slums, 40% of households had no bath or shower at all. 2 decades later, and only 10% of us had to share.
It was out of this world to just go in there and knowing that nobody else has been in there, you haven't got to share it. And it was so nice to have my own bathroom.
Lovely.
As developments like this changed Britain, was a change that rippled through the home. In the old Victorian terraces, the kitchen was the heart of the house, a room to cook, eat and live in.
In the late 1950s, compact galley kitchens like this were state of the art. Strange as it may seem, the designs were based on ideas pioneered in Germany in the 1920s by an Austrian architect called Marguerite Schutt-Lehotzky. She came up with something called the Frankfurt kitchen, which essentially is what we would call a fitted kitchen, where design meant that the kitchen could be small and compact, every detail carefully considered.
The Frankfurt kitchen was envisaged as a laboratory or factory focused solely on the mechanics of cooking. Margaret Schutt-Lehotzky used scientific time and motion studies to demonstrate that women were being overworked in badly laid out bases. She minimised the space required for basic tasks. Everything would be within easy logical reach. The kitchen was also built to a standardised design, meaning it could be mass-produced and would be cheap to install.
An essential part of the fitted kitchen was the integration of space-saving new technology, such as the fridge. The fridge to remove the need for a cooled larder, so one big room could be replaced by a relatively small object like this. Now, here's the thing, let's put this compact galley kitchen to the test. I'm about to cook my breakfast. Cooked, of course, in this wonderful and now almost illicit product, lard. Does start the day nicely, doesn't it? Big Belgian greasy sausage, excellent. Lovely white bread. You see how efficient I am now in my modern galley kitchen. I simply stand here, and a mere flick of the wrist, it goes into the pan. Preparing a lovely breakfast like this in a galley kitchen is one of the easiest things in the world. I've hardly moved my feet. Look, one step from here to here, and all is done. Let's get this to the family next door, panting for their victuals.
The kitchen's lovely. I love my kitchen. It's just, yeah, it's so handy as well. You cook there and you go there, you know, and you don't have to move much.
It's only meant for 2 people. But even me and my husband in there, we used to get and used to say, "Get out of my kitchen, this is my kitchen, get out," because he'd done the cooking.
The centrepiece of Gregory Jones's revolution was the way tenants used the most familiar room in the home.
With light flooding inside and with this wonderful prospect, this room was very much the heart of the flat. And being made as large as possible at the expense of the kitchen over there meant that it had to be multi-use, sort of flexible. That's rather modern, isn't it? So I said the family would have been here as a sitting room, dining here. Children would have been here doing their homework. This was absolutely the focus, the heart of the home.
This was all part of a nationwide effort to transform the way we lived. Just before the first tenants moved in here, the government issued the landmark Parker-Morris Report.
Homes for today and tomorrow. A very important document in the 50s and 60s. It was a vision, really, of how people ought to live, and it importantly set minimum space standards for homes and flats, ensuring that people had generous space in which to live, more space than in the dark and dim Victorian past, the old slums. Also, it examined the changing nature of life in the 1950s. It observed all the labour-saving devices that had arrived, the washing machine, the dishwasher, and the Hoover. Labour-saving devices like that meant there was more time for leisure.
Between 1950 and 1960, the proportion of families with a vacuum cleaner doubled. Homes with a fridge trebled, and washing machine ownership increased tenfold. Technology was starting to shape how we lived in our homes.
More leisure time meant more new leisure activities. One of the great new activities that could be pursued at home in the 1960s was the television. In 1960, as many as 2 households in 3 had TV sets. So, watching television replaced the old activity of gathering round the fireplace watching coals burning. And with the television came the television dinner. Indeed, a social revolution.
This is BBC Television.
TV dinner was itself a reflection of a changing society. As more women worked, there was simply less time for domestic drudgery. But as Britain changed, so nagging questions started to emerge about our new high-rise homes. The utopian ambitions of planners and architects were revealed to have a number of serious flaws. The first crack appeared in the late 1960s. What had seemed to be the solution to the housing problem became overnight a major problem itself.
We had a traffic explosion. We see a load of rubble coming past the window, and the next thing we knew, half the building was already falling down.
What did you do then?
Well, we just panicked, up and run.
On the 16th of May 1968, A small gas explosion on the 18th floor of a tower block just 2 miles from the Lincoln caused one entire corner of the building to collapse like a house of cards. Four people were killed and 17 more injured in the Ronan Point disaster. Clues to what went wrong that fateful day lie here in the Royal Institute of British Architects archives. In the mid-1960s, there was a radical change in the way tower blocks were built. Concrete was slowly poured onto steel reinforcing on site in the early developments like the Lincoln, giving buildings an inherent strength. But this was too slow, too time-consuming to meet the insatiable demand for homes. The solution was to system build. Pre-made concrete slabs were bolted together as a kit of parts, leading to a swathe of near-identical high-rises across Britain. Architect Sam Webb gave evidence at the official inquiry into the disaster.
So, Sam, can you tell me why Ronan Point collapsed?
Well, it was built literally like a pack of cards. So each panel and the floor slabs rested one on top of the other. Right. And what really held them together was gravity. And when you removed one of them, gravity brought it down.
There were mistakes made, weren't there, during the construction process?
Well, they should never have built it this high. It should only have been 4 stories.
Right. It was 22, wasn't it? I think something like that,
Yes. Now, these are bits of the building.
Yes.
That's a floor slab.
Oh, that's a floor, okay.
Yes.
Yes.
And this bolt was in the floor slab. All the ones I saw, and there were lots, were never screwed down tight. And all that was originally holding the walls and the floors together were these pieces of hardboard.
Never. That's it.
That's it.
That's not a bodge, that was part of the system.
That was part of the system. And this was to stop the floor sliding off the wall.
Let's have a look at this photograph, which shows a floor. Here's a wall that's now been removed.
Yes, from there to there should have been solid concrete, 150 millimetres, 6
There's a load of old paper here.
And this is blue circle cement bag, which meant that the entire weight of the building was resting on these bolts, which bent them, if you can...
Right.
Yes.
And any extraordinary events, even a high wind or explosion would topple it, as it did.
Yes.
Ronan Point had very little in common, certainly from a structural point of view, with towers like those erected on the Lincoln estate. Yet its collapse sent a shiver through the nation, leading many to reject the very idea of living in high-rise flats. It wasn't just dodgy builders. Design flaws and municipal penny pinching came to haunt estate after estate. At the Lincoln, the barren open space outside the towers, the lack of maintenance and management inside meant that the open ground floor created by the Pilotti became a dark, ominous wasteland. The estate's open corridors meant open sesame to opportunist criminals.
The estate was awful. There was such a load of break-ins, drugs, everything there. It was really awful. Rapists, we had their blood in the foyer where they had been fighting and that, you know.
When I moved in, the stairways was terrible. There a lot of drugs going around. They was sitting there burning foils and lighters. You see people sleeping, vomiting there. The area was absolutely terrible, I would say.
When it was at its worst, we've got youths hanging around. But there used to be a walkway through, and there was a stabbing in there, and he died. And then there was also a stabbing in the block above that. A chef, there was a group of youths that stabbed him and he died.
The 1970s were a dark decade. High-rise living couldn't survive further cuts in council maintenance as Britain's economy nosedived and budgets were slashed. It wasn't just money. Council homes were previously given to those in work and deserving, but under the 1977 Housing Act, councils now had a duty to house everyone in need, particularly the homeless. This meant new residents were often vulnerable and troubled. On the Lincoln, the pressure told. Flat after flat fell empty. Squatters moved in. One of them was Jenny Fortune. But Jenny wanted to make a difference, banding together with women on the estate to create a people's food cooperative to help the dispirited residents cope with the soaring cost of living.
Living here made you want to take action, to bring about change, to make things better for the working people of the area.
There wasn't community on that estate at that point, just the opposite. People didn't know each other, they were scared of each other. So one of the things we thought we could do was start a food co-op. And we would go off to warehouses and markets, buy the cheaper food, come back and distribute it.
And I see you've brought along some publications, I suppose, from the mid-70s, and it says here, People's Food Co-op, Lincoln Estate Bow, and I remember that sign, Women's Action, Women's Live, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was all about the idea of how important it is to have community.
Oh, no, this is incredibly interesting, the estate. So this is you collecting views, women, I imagine.
This is comments from people who lived on the estate.
I noticed the last box simply says help, which is slightly... But this is a good one. Look, this says the flats don't make it easy to talk. The architecture of these places makes it unnecessarily hard. So, loss of traditional community life, talking over the garden fence, that's all gone.
Yeah, I remember distinctly the long corridor at the top, that the doors were always shut. You never knew who was there or who wasn't there. There was a lot of violence. I mean, I was attacked 3 times. One by some lads with blood all over their hands, one by a guy who was probably insane with a knife, once shot at with an air rifle, but that was common.
Fed up, the Lincoln's residents started to agitate for changes in the way the estate was run.
Well, the potential benefits of packing so many people into high-rise buildings was to create open space at ground floor level, space that could be formed into delightful park-like gardens for communal enjoyment. But of course, the creation of space itself was not enough. The space had to be well designed, well managed, cherished, nurtured, loved. At this period, rarely was that the case. Often the open space became abandoned, became a dangerous no-go area. That happened here.
Outside, I was like, feel bit scared. Normally, there is a problem.
6 o'clock, there's no way we could have been out and be safe walking on the street. I felt like I was in prison, to be honest.
In the mid-1990s, many British council towers were demolished. Written off as too costly to maintain, too expensive to repair, too blighted by social problems to be saved. The fate of the Lincoln hung in the balance.
Morning.
But at the turn of the new millennium, they were saved by abandoning some of their founders' most sacred principles. First, public ownership. In 1998, Tower Hamlets, the local council, sold the Lincoln to Poplar Harker, a housing association. It's a measure of their desperation that the price was £0, 0 pence. The idea was that the semi-private Harker could borrow from the banks, where the council couldn't, and use the money to save the estate. Hugely controversial, but it worked.
We had the security door put on, which was great. They decorated all the hallways, painted all, put the new lifts in.
It's much improved, much better. And it cut down a lot of antisocial behaviours now around. I feel more safer to walk around.
And they've decorated the outside twice. They painted it all white.
That was brilliant. When they first did it, it was like a beacon. You could see that block for miles.
Oh, here we are. Let's grab a lift.
Crucial to fostering a renewed sense of community was the reinstatement of a permanent caretaker.
Oh, that's very efficient, isn't it? It's good. They've been waiting for us.
I'm joining Danny McFarlane on his rounds.
And I suppose, you know, the tenants having you doing this for them, you know, that's a big deal. It makes it more than just a housing block. It makes it a home.
That's the way I look at it. It's nice to be part of the community that I'm working in.
Of course, things are pretty different now. I mean, a few years ago, there wasn't a caretaker every day, was there?
No, not in the old days. It would come in, come out. But it was falling apart. The properties were falling apart.
Yeah.
And the council didn't have the money to do them. And the housing associations took over. Not everyone will agree with me on that, but when you look at the properties now compared to how they was, they needed money spent on them, and the housing associations done it.
Yeah.
We've planted apple trees and pear trees next to the block.
Yeah.
When I was being brought up round here, if someone had said we're going to plant apple trees and pear trees, I would have laughed at them, you know. But this shows you how the East End of London has changed for the good.
It isn't just the Lincoln that's been spruced up. Over the last decade, the public image of the high-rise flat has itself been given an astonishing makeover. Today, city centre high-rise flats built for private occupation or investment are among the most sought-after properties on the market. It seems ironic that high-rise living, the centrepiece of the social housing revolution of the 50s and 60s, is now the mainstay of the private housing boom transforming the country's skyline. In London alone, there are over 220 residential skyscrapers being built or being planned. Just a mile south of the Lincoln is London Docklands, an area bristling with this new breed of privatised skyscraper. Eager to discover their appeal, I'm being sold a show flat by estate agent Adam Dockley.
Right, OK, so we'll start in the entrance hallway. You have a utility cupboard just on the right-hand side here, which has got your boiler in. Then through here into the master bedroom. Windows are all west-facing, so you get the evening sun.
Yep.
Comfort cooling.
Which is sort of a modern word for air conditioning. That keeps it at a nice balance.
Level. Yes.
Yeah,
Exactly.
OK.
And then you come through here into the reception room, and this has the views onto Canary Wharf.
Yes.
A bit of water. And then your open plan kitchen. Everything's integrated in there, so oven, hob, dishwasher, fridge, freezer, sink, all that sort of stuff.
How typical is this of high-rise flats being constructed in London at the moment?
Very much so. I think it is a typical layout, typical construction, you know, floor-to-ceiling glass windows, and obviously open-plan kitchens, en suites and what have you. So it is typical.
What sort of price is this sort of?
This one's on the market at $650. And typically, for a two-bedroom in this area, you can go anywhere from $550 to $950. Depending on what it is, how big it is, what the views are, whether it has parking, the development itself, if the development itself has 24-hour concierge, gym, pool, all that sort of stuff. Obviously that accentuates it.
Yes.
To rent this flat would cost over £2,500 a month, compared to an average of just £500 for one of the Lincolns. Ironically, they're the same size, around 700 square feet. It seems that private developers have cottoned onto what the idealists of the LCC realised.
These luxury flats are a reminder that now, as 60 years ago, building high can be seen as one possible solution to the city's housing crisis. As the population of the city increases and building land becomes ever more rare and expensive, there is simply nowhere to go but up.
The Lincolns' first tenants arrived in 1962, a lifetime ago. Finally, it seems the original flaws in vision and design are being overcome. Today, the cherished idea of community is also returning. I'm visiting a sewing school that has taken up residence in the bottom of Gayton House. Back in the bad old days, this space was a dark, neglected void nestling between the pilotti.
And we're gonna learn how to finish the shoulder and the side. Okay, you happy with that? Yes. Okay.
In your view, has this community centre helped to build up a sense of community on the estate?
Oh yeah, it does. And it's funny because also you learn, you learn the culture, you learn how people communicate with like different nationalities and everything. And sometimes you learn like new words, you know, from other languages.
Yes, and you meet people, you get to know them.
Of course.
And strangers become friends, and that's why communities are so important, isn't it?
Which is difficult living in
Difficult
London,
normally.
in a very busy city.
All that grows from communal shared activities such as this.
For much of the Lincolns' life, the original fears of the old East Enders seemed borne out. The Lincoln was an often divided and isolating place. But today, real strides are being made to remedy the mistakes of the past.
No matter how much they offered me, I wouldn't move. I love it there. A lot of people say, when I say I'm in a masonette on the 17th floor, how could you live on the 17th floor in a high-rise block? But they don't realise, until you've lived there, how nice it is. It's really nice.
I mean, if my neighbour didn't see me for a little while, she would knock to make sure I was okay and stuff like that. So, it's pretty good. It's really nice.
Now I think it'll hurt me if I leave this area, to be honest. I would never thought 10 years back I would cry for this area, but probably I will now.
From its birth, the fortunes of the high-rise flat have been in constant flux, buffeted by the twists and turns of public opinion. In the 1950s, they were embraced as an idealistic solution to a national housing crisis. In the 1970s, they were loathed as socially irresponsible and a blot on the landscape. Today, the private penthouse is synonymous with glamour and a hefty price tag. But with another housing crisis on our hands, with an entire generation priced out of owning a home, perhaps we all need to fall back in love with high-rise living. Over the course of this series, I've examined why our homes look the way they do.
It gets tighter.
I've seen how evolving technology,
That's it.
changing lifestyles, and political decisions have all played their part in transforming our homes. What has also become apparent is that every era has thrown up its own unique style of home, designed and built to meet the specific needs of that particular time.
Over the years, the buildings we live in have changed dramatically, from timber-framed cottages to concrete-built skyscrapers. But one thing has remained unchanging. All these buildings have become homes, and homes are always more than just buildings. They are expressions of who we are. They are, in their way, a very particular history of the nation.